When I woke up this morning, I read a story about this IT professional who got fired from his job and ended up living in a trailer working DoorDash to make ends meet. How can you avoid that fate? One of the answers is become an expat. And one of the countries expats choose for living or long-term stays is Vietnam. This beautiful, gorgeous country is also ultra cheap. For example, you can easily rent an apartment that's close to everything for less than $500 a month. And yes, I'm talking about a very nice sized 1 or 2 bedroom apartment that's fairly close to the beach. And Vietnam has plenty of expats and digital nomads living there. Well, how do people stay in Vietnam for months, even years? After all, this country doesn't have a digital nomad or a retirement visa. Well, you've got a few options. I'll list them here from the most difficult to the easiest ones, and I'll also mention things that don't work. Essentially, you can break this up into two categories: a TRC, which is a temporary residence card, or visa runs. By the way, on each topic, I will include links below in the description that explain all the details of this particular topic. And if you like this video, by the way, don't forget to press the like button and subscribe to the Elite Kid channel for a lot more videos on how to stay abroad in different countries if you want to become an expat or a nomad. So how can you get a TRC? Well, most of the ways to get a TRC assume other purposes. The first thing you can do is to get an investor visa. There are 4 categories of investor visas that differ based on the amount of money you're willing to invest in the economy, and the minimum tire is just under $120,000, but different tires can grant you the opportunity to apply for up to 5 years temporary residence. Another thing you can do to get temporary residence in Vietnam is open a company. This is a bit more difficult because each province has a different set of requirements for opening a company and hiring employees, so you definitely need to actually come to the country and visit the closest government office yourself. I have an interview with a guy who opened his own chocolate factory in Vietnam. This is actually a very interesting interview because he essentially moved his family's business that's over 100 years old from Spain to Vietnam, and he does cover on how to do that and where to go and what you will require if you want to open your own business in the country. Don't forget that when opening a company, you also need to register yourself as an employee there. You have to pay taxes for yourself and for the company itself, so this is not a simple process. At the same time, the company should be located at its legal address, so there's quite a lot of topics that you need to cover. If you're lucky enough to happen to meet someone you fell in love with, you can of course marry that person, which however will not automatically grant you citizenship. This will also give you a chance to apply for a TRC. What you can do is marry a Vietnamese person, then if you're out of the country, you should go to the closest Vietnamese embassy and apply for a TRC with them directly. And if you're in Vietnam, even if you're here on a tourist visa, you can apply for a TRC based on marriage with the following list of documents right here. Another option you have if you marry a Vietnamese national is apply for visa exemption. If you're out of Vietnam, again, you should contact your nearest Vietnamese embassy. And aside from spouses of Vietnamese citizens, there are other categories of people who qualify for visa exemption. And those would be Vietnamese people residing overseas or children of Vietnamese nationals. The next way to get a TRC is to acquire a work visa. Now, this is a rather popular option. There are a lot of foreigners working in Vietnam. And the first thing you need to do if you seek employment there, you need to acquire a work permit. Work permits do require employer sponsorship and are issued based on your qualifications, your job position, etc. Essentially, what that translates to is you need an employer who will take care of all the details for you. If you want to get a job in Vietnam, the easiest thing to do, I would say this is the most popular option for many expats, is to get a teaching job, of course, specifically teaching English. I personally know a lot of people who live in Vietnam who do that. This is a very fun and rewarding job, and all you need for this is a bachelor's degree, a teaching English as a foreign language certificate, and very important, a clean criminal record. Other than that is the same. You need to find a school that will sponsor you. You will need to very likely actually go to Vietnam in order to have an interview with them, and then the school will process all the documents for you. But yes, having a job in Vietnam will also get you a temporary residence card. And by the way, TRCs are usually given for 2 years, and if you choose not to extend your TRC, you need to simply leave the country, and that's it. There are no other procedures required to close it or anything like that. It's very easy. The next thing you can get is a student visa. I have a link down below in the description with a list of universities you can potentially apply to, and you need to get in touch with them and check their requirements and talk to them in order to get information on what they will require in order for you to get one. Keep in mind that in many universities you need to pay in advance for a year, and yes, of course, you need to actually study because very likely if you don't pass your first exams, you will be kicked out very fast, even if you paid your year's tuition. But it is a legit valid option. Yes, you can study in Vietnam. So if that is something you desire to do, I do encourage you to contact the universities directly. When you do your research, however, and Googling is practically inevitable here, be very careful of websites looking like official visa websites or companies offering their services, because there are a lot of scam websites and you really don't want to get involved with one. So quadruple check your information when researching, and definitely be careful of who you deal with. And this is definitely not just true for Vietnam, this is true for just about any country. Point is, be careful and do your research when doing your research. So these are pretty much all of your options if you want to get an actual TRC. Now, the one thing that doesn't work, even though you can do that, is getting real estate. You cannot own land in Vietnam. All land is owned by the government, but you can buy an apartment. And keep in mind that buying an apartment in Vietnam means that you're just buying an apartment in Vietnam. You will still have to enter the country on a tourist visa unless you do any other things that I mentioned in order to get temporary residence. So now that we're done with TRCs, your second category is good old visa runs. This is probably the most popular option, and most people when entering Vietnam will have to get a tourist visa. Now keep in mind that visa runs are always kind of a gray area. Vietnam does have a very friendly policy, meaning they don't have a limit on how many days you can stay in the country, and while some people may do that for years in Vietnam, do please remember that things can change suddenly and without notice, as can happen pretty much anywhere, but it's fairly common in Asia especially. So expect nothing and always have a way to retrieve your stuff in case you get stuck. If you do choose to visa run, you have a few options as well, mainly depending on how lucky you are. I'll explain what I mean later in the video. If it's visa runs for you, you pretty much have to apply for a tourist visa every time. Most people have to go to this website and apply for a 90-day tourist visa. The process is fairly straightforward. You have to fill out all your personal information, all the information about your stay in Vietnam, etc., etc. This is what it looks like. You also have to upload a photo of yourself. Well, I'm sure you'll figure out the rest. And then depending on if you want a single entry or a multi-entry, you pay $25 or $50. You have to wait for a few days to actually get the visa approved. However, if you're a citizen of one of the following countries, you can pause the video to read the list more carefully. You may be denied a Vietnamese visa for no reason. And if you go with an agency to get your tourist visa, it may be impossible for you to expedite their service. Also, you can get your tourist visa denied if you get some of the information wrong, like incorrect personal information, getting the address wrong, or getting the dates of visa validity wrong. And keep in mind, you cannot apply for an e-visa while you're in Vietnam. You have to be out of the country when you're applying, and you have to wait for the e-visa to arrive. It arrives by email. You have to wait for it to arrive while you're out of the country. Only then, only after that, can you enter. This is another very common mistake, and keep in mind, the fees are not refunded, so you have to be very careful with that as well. No matter which country you're from, the tourist visa is always valid for 90 days. However, there is another list of countries that don't require a visa to Vietnam. I call it the lucky ones. Here is that list. You can pause the video to study it, but I'll explain in a second what this is about. Citizens of these countries are eligible to enter Vietnam on a stamp, and the number in parentheses is the number of days that a citizen of each corresponding country can stay in Vietnam. As you can see, 45 days is the most common amount of time that a person can stay on a stamp in Vietnam. This law has been passed a couple of years ago, I believe, and you don't have to worry about this until 2028, which is how long this visa waiver has been extended. Before this law was passed, visa stamps used to be issued for 15 days only, so this change was rather welcomed by everyone who stayed in Vietnam extensively. I personally happen to have a US and a Russian passport, so in Vietnam, for ease, I just use my Russian passport because I don't have to worry about a visa. And every 45 days I did a visa run. So if you don't know what a visa run is and how it's done and what you need to do in order to visa run from Vietnam, check out this other video where I explain all of this thoroughly. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please don't forget to press the like button and subscribe to the Elitka channel for a lot more information on how to stay abroad in different countries all over the world. Thank you very much for watching, and stay nomad.